And here we go. I'm going to share this one. Don't forget to record. I got you. I got to write notes to myself or I'll forget everything. Okay, so epidemiologic, big word, deals with epidemics, right? So we're looking at the study of disease. If you are listening to people about this pandemic that's taking place around the world, the people that know the most are epidemiologists, and most of them have said, I've told you so. They've been talking about something like this taking place for a long time. And surprisingly, when they're referring to COVID-19, a lot of them are saying this is not that bad, actually. Like they start looking at, I mean, it's bad, don't get me wrong, but if you just study diseases for a living, they're like there are a lot like crazier things that could take place. They could be more harmful, more deadly, could spread easier, and things like that. But epidemiology is the study of disease. So what happens is in the epidemiologic model, somebody looked at the demographic transition model and they said, oh, I'm going to make a new model, the epidemiologic transition model. And in my model, all I'm going to do is explain what was causing people to die in the demographic transition model. All right, so this is going to go right along with what we just learned. So as we get into stage one of this new model, all they're going to say is in stage one of the demographic transition model, this is what was killing people. In stage two, this is what was killing people, and they go through. All right, so they line right up with one another until they get to stage five, and then it gets just not tricky, but it just splits a little bit. So the epidemiologic transition model explains the most common cause of death at each stage in the demographic transition model. Are we good on that? Does that make sense? I hope so. And here I found the most pleasant pleasant picture of old people dying that I could find without getting too gross there. All right, so stage one of the epidemiologic transition model, remember, is explaining what was killing people in stage one of the demographic transition model. So each of these stages lines up. And I'll probably say that in the next few slides, but eventually just keep that in mind. So the first thing is that there are epidemics and natural checks, they call it. So pestilence, you have like a swarm of bugs comes and eats up all your crops, which causes famine. There's a lack of food. You have epidemics like the bubonic plague, the Black Plague, that hit Europe in the 1300s, where a third of the people died. And the natural checks is when people go to war, there's accidents, things like that. So we've already been covering this stuff, right? When we talked about why are death rates so high in stage one, we've already mentioned these types of things. But while we're talking about the Black Plague, I don't know if you guys have learned this in world history class, but this is one of these things I learned like later in life. And I was like, how come I didn't know this? And it's about the song Ring Around the Rosie. Have you ever heard about this?
Yep.
Okay, so this little rhyme that kids like sing and dance in a circle and hold hands and they're all having fun and it's hilarious. Like my daughter would do like, you want to play Ring Around the Rosie? And I'm like, no, it's about the plague. I'm just kidding. I would play with her. But yeah, so Ring Around the Rosie, when people would get the plague, they'd get these huge boils in like their lymph nodes, like under their neck and armpits and stuff like that. And they were like red and swollen, like a rosy red ring around their body, and a pocket full of posies that are flowers. So many people were dying that the cities where this was taking place throughout Europe were just horrible smelling. They couldn't get rid of bury the bodies fast enough. And they thought maybe it's being spread through the smell. And it's easy for us in 2020 to be like, what a bunch of idiots. It wasn't through the smell. But before people figured out medicine, right, they're just trying to get a feel for it. So it was not uncommon for people to fill their pockets with flowers, posies, to try to ward off the smell and make sure they don't get sick. And then ashes, we all fall down. They started burning bodies to get rid of them because there's so many, and we all fall down. Obviously, we're all going to die, which is a really kind of dark song. And I'm not really sure of the history of why it eventually came to children just like giggling in the grass, having fun, because it shouldn't be. But anyhow, as you move to stage two of the epidemiologic transition model, which is explaining why people are dying in stage two of the demographic transition model, what happened is when they moved to these cities, so the Industrial Revolution brings new technology to the farms, that pushes people a big migration to the cities. It's called a rural to urban migration. As they move there, at first, there were horrible living conditions. There's a bunch of photojournals of the slums, New York City and London, of where all these people are just living. Like you can see this picture on the left. I mean, it looks like they got at least 5 people there, and I'm sure there's some more behind them. Like it's just horrible living conditions. If one of those people gets sick, the whole house, I'm gonna call that a house, the whole compartment is getting sick. And then you can see this picture on the right, just all this trash all over the place. Before governments had like sanitation departments that would come and clean that up. There was no plumbing, so people were using buckets for the bathroom, and when they're done, they're just dumping them out in the streets. A lot of that stuff gets into the river, the same river people are getting water to drink, like horrible, horrible living conditions. So it's important to know when the Industrial Revolution takes place, death rates didn't just drop immediately. First, they crowded into these nasty living conditions near rats and all kinds of stuff like that. And eventually they're like, okay, we can't be doing this. And they figured out how to clean it up. As you see, they improved sanitation, different nutrition, better medicine. And now these pandemics that are hitting are starting to recede. They're starting to go away slowly. All right, so stage 2 is receding pandemics. Once they're living in cities and people are starting to have fewer and fewer children, remember that's the birth rates. Now what this model is explaining is that people are dying from degenerative diseases, human-created diseases. These are like your body's just kind of wearing out over time. So there's less deaths from diseases that are very infectious and spreading because we have vaccinations. But now, since people aren't dying in their young age of crazy diseases like mumps and measles, as we said, now they can live into adulthood. But now they live so long that their bodies are starting to give out on them. All right, so like heart disease, diabetes and things like that. In stage 4, what happens is we get smarter and we start to realize, okay, we don't have to worry about all these deadly diseases because we have vaccinations. What we need to worry about is taking care of our bodies. And now you see so many more trends of like CrossFit and people staying healthy and going to the gym and diet and exercise because people are aware of it. So what happens is these same diseases, whereas your bodies degenerate, they're still killing people, but it just takes longer for it to take place. Okay, you put a delay on it. So I'll give you an example. My dad is 66. It doesn't matter. He's in his 60s. And his mom actually had a heart attack when he was in 8th grade and dropped dead. So as horrible as that was, I never got to meet my grandma, and he lost his mom. He was always like really kind of aware of the fact that if you don't treat your body right, like you can get your heart attack. And he was only in 8th grade at the time, but like as he got older, he always paid attention to fitness, like always going on jogs and stuff like that. Now he's not like some super chiseled like model 66-year-old, but he's not overweight, and he makes it a habit to stay in shape and work out and stuff like that because he's worried about that heart disease getting him. There's other things as well. So my mom, I think I told you guys that both my parents are from huge families, 7 kids and 9 kids. My mom's from the 9 kids. And her older sister, I want to say it was like around their like 43rd birthday or something like that, got breast cancer, and she recovered. She's fine, but it's very scary. My mom didn't get it, but then each one of her younger sisters, as they hit age 43, mom's second oldest, as they hit 43, right around that age, were getting breast cancer. Like it was like going down. And I don't know all the research on it, but I know that like there was split at the time as if it's hereditary or not. And a lot of people are like, well, it must be, like, look at all these sisters getting it. My mom swears that it's based on your environment, and she's like terrified of cancer, so she's always reading up stuff about it. And there's certain things, like she stopped drinking milk. She used to drink milk all the time, and then she's like read somewhere that the hormones might cause cancer. She's like, no more milk. She never drinks soda or anything like that. She's got all these theories about what might be causing cancer, and on top of that, she gets screened like 4 times more than you need to. Her doctors are always like, what are you doing back, to make sure. And she so far, knock on wood, has been able to kind of avoid that. So people get smarter, and these diseases kind of are delayed and put off. All right, so this is where it splits. So just to recap, the epidemiologic transition model is explaining what's going on in the demographic transition model. When the demographic transition model was first created, there's only 4 stages. So England had high birth and death rates. The Industrial Revolution came by, so they got their death rates under control, and everyone moved to cities. And after they moved to cities, they're like, wow, it's really crowded. Let's have fewer kids. And their birth rates dropped, and then they met happily ever after in stage 4, low and even, and the population stopped growing. Okay. At that time, the epidemiologic transition model, before there was a stage 5 of the demographic transition model, said, I bet there's going to be another stage. And what they said is that, oh, there it is. We got a picture of it. So instead of me having to do my hands, we could have looked at it. Yeah. So what they said is this was the original demographic transition model. The epidemiologic transition model is going to tack on a 5th stage. Okay. So what they said is that what's going to happen is if we keep on treating these diseases with specifically antibiotics, eventually these diseases evolve and our medicines are useless to them. And because of enhanced transportation, remember space-time compression and globalization, the world is so much more interconnected. So when a disease does spread that our medicine doesn't work, it's going to go all over the place. And they think that we're actually going to see death rates go back up. And this is kind of scary in what's going on in the world now due to something like this. Okay. One thing, if you ever notice, if you get sick and the doctor gives you antibiotics and it says take 10 days until all the medicine's gone, right? And a good doctor should really sit you down and be like, no, make sure you do that. Trust me. Okay. But a lot of times people take it 3-4 days. I feel better, and they throw it in the trash. And that's a really bad thing because the 10 days, the reason you take it is you completely wipe out that virus. Okay, if you get it until you feel better, it's still in your body, and it gets a little taste of the antibiotic that's starting to kill it. But it could, if you cough on something and it goes out into the real world and someone else gets it and it starts to get stronger, now it knows a little bit how to fight back against those antibiotics because you didn't take it the full 10 days. And if the next person only takes it a little bit and not the full 10 days and it jumps on to the next person, they get stronger and stronger and more resistant to these drugs, and we can't beat them. So take your medicine for the amount of time they prescribe is the short of it. Now, why this gets a little bit confusing is because, remember, they added on this 5th stage when the demographic transition model only had 4. But the demographic transition model was like, who's this dude making a model off my model? I don't care about them. So they just ignored him. And what we actually saw is not death rates going up, but we saw birth rates going back down. Okay, so this leads a lot of people to think like, well, wait, should we add a 6th stage? What should we do? It's the easiest for our class to just put them in 2 separate categories, right? We got the demographic transition model we've been studying. We know all about it. It's got 5 stages. We got the epidemiologic transition model, which thought that one only had 4 stages and added its 5th one in there. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're going through it and as you're studying. All right. Let's see. Let me stop my recording here. Y'all got any questions? Any of that clear? Anything not making sense?